Okay, so let's get into more detail on virtual reality itself. So I acknowledged previously that right now virtual reality is in its first release, and therefore it's very limited in terms of what it does in its current state. But it's very easy when you actually listen to some of the people that are very close to the industry. People like developers, the CEOs of the major tech companies, investors, and just people within the industry. And because we're so immersed in it, we've heard all about where it's headed. And we're really excited about the potential. So what we want to do in this video is we want to take some of the most important topics within virtual reality. We want to talk about its hardware, its software. We want to talk about how people are using it for marketing. We want to talk about investment within the industry. We want to talk about what the media is saying and how it's being used within the various industries. And we want to talk about it in terms of its current state, but we also want to predict and forecast where is it going to go within each of these different categories. It has so much potential, and we're so excited about it. But a lot of people are not commenting about the business side of things and really the impact that it might have on that. So that's exactly what we want to do. We're going to take all of those categories, we're going to talk about the current state and where it's headed in the next couple of years. Now this is going to be a long series of videos because we're going to get detailed. But we're going to get detailed in a business perspective. So we think it's very valuable to keep on listening and to really get into this detail so that you can develop your own perspective on all of these topics. Two videos that we're going to use. We're going to go into the slides next and cover each of these topics. So let's do it. Okay, so why don't we start with hardware? So we'll start with the current state and then we'll move on to what our predictions are. So based on what it is today, how do we think it's going to improve or just change in the future? So let's start with the current hardware that exists in today's market. So right now there's 5 main headsets. Now more and more are emerging, but these are the 5 that are on the market as of May 2017. So the Samsung Gear is the most popular right now. It's sold 782,000 units, definitely the cheapest of the bunch, and it only works on Samsung phones at the moment. It's a mobile VR system where you plug it into the headset and then all of a sudden it works. Now there's 4 other ones. Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive tend to be the highest market ones. They're also the most expensive, and as you can see, it's because it's a more expensive unit, it sells less. The Google Daydream is relatively new. It's a cheaper version of it, and they're actually coming out with new versions in the future, and that's been well sold at the very beginning. And then PlayStation VR has been a really well sold one as well, because it's basically an addendum to the existing PlayStation system, and because a lot of VR is in gaming right now, it's naturally going to appeal to that segment of the market. So that's the current state of what exists now. Now there are plenty of other things. So Microsoft is one example, where they're previewing a mixed reality headset, and that'll be manufactured by both Acer as well as HP, and that's due for release later this year in August. And that'll debut at a $299, $329 price point, so you can see it's kind of right in the middle of the market. There's other smaller companies right now offering cheaper headsets. Now, VR is not necessarily a new technology, and so a lot of these are very basic, very bare bones in terms of its offering and its potential. There's tons of VR accessories that makes the experiences a lot more interesting, and those are sold separately from the headsets itself. And then in order to run VR, depending on which headset that you buy, it's going to need an accompanying PC or a mobile device. Now, the VR-compatible PCs are very expensive. They're gaming computers with high graphics requirements. Most often they're costing around the $1,500 range. You can get some for a little bit cheaper. Others have more features and they're a bit more expensive, but on average it's about that much. Now the Gear, as well as the Daydream, they run on a more mobile system. So that's compatible and sold in bundles with all the different Samsung phones, the Google one with Android capable devices as well. Now, Google recently announced they're actually going to do a standalone one manufactured by HTC, and it's going to run on the Daydream platform. So that'll be a really interesting one because it's not going to be wired. It's going to be kind of a standalone system that's capable of connecting via the headset only. So they're a little sparse on the details at this point in time, but that's going to be an interesting one to watch because it's going to kind of combine the features that HTC offers, but within the Google Daydream environment. So it'll run on Android and have all of the features associated with that app store. So that'll be a really interesting development. But that's the current state of where the hardware is at right now. Now, what's our predictions? How will that change in the coming years to come? So first of all, we know that the headset technology will inevitably improve. Just like the PC and the mobiles did, we talked about that in the last video. We know that graphics will improve. There'll be high resolution capability. We know there's going to be improved rendering, so it'll mimic really what you see in the real world. When you move your eyes, how does that look to the human eye? Virtual reality will continue to replicate a lot of what that is. And then just less glitch in terms of how it moves. So if you walk forward, if you turn your head, if you look behind you, that's going to all improve in terms of the capabilities that offer and just the lifelike aspect of what it looks like to the average human. The headsets are also going to become a lot more comfortable. They're big, they're clunky, they're uncomfortable right now. We think they'll evolve into kind of a sunglasses type fit because that's a comfortable, very lightweight solution. Right now the technology's not there, but as PCs did, as mobile phones did, we know that they'll get smaller and much more easy, more consumer friendly. In addition, they'll be wireless. So we mentioned this new HTC one that's coming out. That's going to be wireless, but rather than having wires connecting into your computer or having to put your mobile phone in there, we see it running as a standalone object where you can connect to the internet and run basically everything through that headset. We know the price will come down, so you're not in the future going to need a gaming computer. We've actually heard from many of the different manufacturers that that's a huge priority for them. We know that the high-end headsets, they're going to decrease in price. You can see the sales numbers right there. The Oculus, the HTC Vive, there's a big priority to get that to a more consumer-friendly number so that it can reach that mass adoption number. Another expectation we have is that it's going to mix or merge with augmented reality for more of a mixed reality. So how that'll materialize, we'll see. When that will happen, we'll definitely see. AR, the technology is not quite as far along as virtual reality is, but down the line, 5-7 years down the line, we see that merging into a single device that's capable of doing both things. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Finally, we think that the accessories for VR will become very popular. So things like wearables to track body movement might be commonplace. You might wear a bodysuit type of thing, so it tracks every aspect of your movement. In addition, setup will become another easier thing with better motion tracking solutions. Definitely something that's a priority to make the VR experience a lot better. So as you can see, the current state of hardware, it's the first release. It's going to improve. Every aspect of it is going to get better. And we know that all of these companies, Facebook, Google, Sony, HTC, all of these companies are working very hard. They've said it explicitly that they're going to do all of these things. So it's only a matter of time until it evolves into a really, really amazing device. Okay, let's move on to software. So in the current state, you have app stores, very similar to the mobile environment. A lot of the apps right now are over a platform called Steam. And Steam is very popular. It's been around for quite a long time now. It's popular with the gaming crowd. So a lot of computer gaming, mobile gaming gets sold over Steam. And then the natural byproduct of that was, well, why don't we sell VR-capable games as well? So you can see that over 1,000 apps that are capable of running on VR currently exist on Steam. And that's just a marketplace. So you go on there, you purchase the app, you download it to your computer or your mobile device, and all of a sudden you're able to use it. Now the devices themselves, that's actually been a big war right now between all these different companies, is to say we want exclusive rights over the App Store because that's a profitable thing for them. So HTC has Viveport and quite a number of apps there. The Oculus Store actually runs on both the Rift as well as the Samsung Gear, and that has quite a few apps. Some are exclusive, some are running on both of those. And then the PlayStation VR within its infrastructure has quite a number of games as well. And again, PlayStation will be focused much more on the entertainment and gaming sector. So that's the list as of mid-May 2017. A lot of the titles within those apps are repeats, and a lot of them support all of the VR systems, or at least multiple of them as well. So as you can see, there's a lot out there, a lot of availability, a lot of different things that you can go try out. But at the end of the day, when you compare it to the number of apps that are available for mobile, it's not even close. There's a long, long way to go. So much more in terms of the software and applications that VR will eventually produce. The vast majority of these are in the gaming space. I would say over 90% right now are entertainment-driven apps. There's a couple education apps. There's a couple business apps. But for the very most part, It's entertainment-driven experiences at this part. Now, developers are doing something very interesting for VR. This is not something they really did much for mobile. They're doing something called early access. Now, to develop a VR experience, it's a lot bigger than just your typical mobile app. You're going to be required to do all kinds of different simulations, really high-intensity graphics. You're going to have to get into lighting. You're going to have to get into motion. You're going to have to do so many different things. It's 360. That's another one. So because of all of these different things, it takes a lot to build a VR app. So what developers are doing is they're enabling early access, where maybe they create something that's usable to the consumer, but it's only about, let's say, 10 to 20% finished. What the consumers will then do is they'll sample this out. So let's say they sell an app for $10. They'll sample out that 10 to 20%. It might be the first world or the first level of a game, and they'll give feedback on it. Now, they've already paid the $10, so more or less what that's doing is it's funding the rest of the development. So developers can go out and just do a portion of the work, release it, they can get all of this customer feedback, and then they can use all the proceeds that people have used to purchase those levels to ultimately fund the full development. So it's a really, really cool way for developers to gain access to the market despite the very stringent development requirements. So very interesting there, and we think that'll really help develop higher quality as well as higher quantity apps. Okay, so predictions. So the very first thing is that the quantity and quality of VR software today will be very comparable to the mid-90s PC software. So as we've stated in previous videos, business applications are almost non-existent on VR right now. But eventually that's going to become the dominant medium. It's going to take a very similar path to what happened with PCs, where at first it was just gaming, eventually it became a much more broad usage. The second point is that gaming is going to improve, but it'll become less than 10% of the software in just a few years, despite it being 90% about right now. So gaming, definitely a wide usage for virtual reality, but it's not going to be the exclusive usage like it is today. Now, application development will resemble mobile in terms of how quickly the market gets established. So right now, anybody can create an app. It's very simple. You can distribute it independently, or you can put it on one of these marketplaces that we talked about before. But the fact of the matter is there's such a large pool of development talent relative to what we had back in the 90s when PCs were popular. Anybody can create it. There's low barriers to entry. Anyone can learn the skills, and anyone can then distribute it. So with data residing in the cloud, great collaboration tools, and easy to build software, the barrier to entry is low, and we expect the number of apps to really start to accelerate as there's a business case to do it, as adoption becomes a lot more than it is today. Now, that being said, even though quantity will probably increase, the quality might lag a little bit when you compare it to mobile. So most VR experiences are just more sophisticated than mobile, and they require very large development efforts. It's a little bit difficult for one person to develop an entire app because there's just so much to do. The other big thing is that developers lack design skills in many cases. So in the future, if you have a big development team, it's not just people who can code in a specific language. You're going to need actually that dual skill set of being able to code, but also understand the design elements of what it takes to put together something that resembles the real world. That's things like lighting. It's things like how motion works in terms of when you turn your head. It's how things look to the human eye when you really focus in on it and look at the very fine details of what things look like. That's very different than what you see on a computer screen or a mobile screen today. So people are going to need those design skills, and we think that that'll be a big skill set that will be part of the development team in the future. Okay, let's move on to the next, and that will be commerce. So how will commerce work today in terms of VR? Well, all the commerce right now is pretty much done via app stores. So we told you before that Steam is the most popular for generic use, and then each headset has its own corresponding app store. Now, independent VR experience creators and distributors may put content on their own website. So anyone can create something, put it on their website, and have you download it from there. But the problem is there's no easy way to search for it and find it. So commerce using that sort of an approach, that sort of a distribution model, is pretty light right now. But we think that down the line that's going to change, and we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, right now it's capable And there are people who are doing it, but it's few and far between. Now, niche content is being distributed in a few early established markets, but it's typically downloaded for free at this point because, like I said, very difficult to actually find these apps from wherever they're being distributed from. So let's give a couple examples. So Netflix already has an established market. Well, they're actually distributing an app for all the major headsets, and they produce exclusive VR content. The movie industry is following suit with some VR-specific content as well. USA Today is another example, as well as the New York Times. They both have so USA Today actually has a weekly VR show, and that brings news and interesting 360-degree experiences to VR, so you can get your news or whatever sort of content they're producing via VR. And then the New York Times launches daily stories that are exclusive to the VR experience. So you can actually see and turn your head, and you can see the news real time, like it's basically happening around you. And then, of course, we all know that porn is unfortunately a big usage of media in the internet these days. Well, it's carried over to VR, and actually it's been one of the early adopters. So while we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that, the main point here is that it's actually receiving 500,000 views per day for their VR content. So it's no small number, it's actually quite a significant thing. But we see that going beyond adult entertainment and getting into some more generic, more broad-based subjects as well. But as you can see, the potential is there, even in a subject like that. Now, moving on to our predictions. So everything that's currently sold over the internet is eventually going to be enhanced in the virtual reality world. So any physical product can be seen in 3D. So you could even walk through a virtual store. Anything that you sell over the internet right now, isn't it going to be better if you could actually physically walk into a store, a virtual store, and see it? Well, virtual reality is going to do that. Any service that's delivered over the internet can be enhanced in a 3D environment because you're actually existing within that environment. So why not use that instead of having it being delivered over a screen? Now, e-commerce carts and the payment options associated with that are going to need to be accommodated via VR. So right now, there's so many good options. There's PayPal, there's Stripe, there's Square, there's all kinds of different options. Well, that very same capability is going to need to be required once you're walking through virtual stores in virtual reality. So all the infrastructure, all the different options, that'll eventually migrate its way over to it. And then entirely new products are going to emerge. So a good example of that is we expect a virtual travel industry to become very popular, where you go pick a place anywhere in the world and you go pretend like you're there. You travel there, you walk, you do tours through the city, you see their monuments and landmarks, and basically any city in the world can put their experience over VR and then sell that in their marketplaces. So all kinds of different things are going to happen in VR. It doesn't really exist right now, but in the future, there's no question these things are going to exist. In addition, there's going to be a virtual reality internet. And that's going to include all the things that we think of in today's internet, the 2D internet. So things like browsers, search, the ability to find simulations, VR-specific social media. Now, why is all this going to exist? Well, first of all, developers can't code on so many different platforms, and that's going to really bring about this user experience similar to what we use a browser for today, so that everything's kind of located in one place, and then you can get and navigate to various places within this virtual reality world. In addition, apps are currently standalone, but like the internet, it's going to need to be tied together. So right now you download an experience and everything that happens in that experience is within the confines of that program. That's what used to happen in the PCs when they were in their infant stages. You download a program and everything happened on that program. But we see it migrating to more of an open structure similar to how the internet is today, where everything is tied together. Software, e-commerce, websites, basically everything. Finally, eventually devices are going to need to be standalone, and they won't need to connect to laptops or phones, and they also won't need to have those exact same distribution methods. The App Store is specific to those devices. So when virtual reality is its own device, we expect that own device to have all the features that a laptop or a mobile phone might have, which is exactly what we described: social features, browsers, search, all those different things. So commerce, not really big right now. It's mostly exclusive to these app stores and gaming, but it's going to really explode and it's going to resemble the internet that we know today. Okay, last and not least is marketing. Now, this is going to be a big subject, I'm sure, for all the businesses that are listening in right now, but marketing, not too big right now. It's going to explode in the future, though. So here's what we see today. So VR marketing right now has mainly consisted in on-site demos in the early stages of the technology. So 3 examples that we'll use, but there's certainly more of them. So the first is Lowe's, and they're doing this really cool thing called Hollow Room, which basically enables customers that are in store to design rooms within their home. So they start on a tablet and they visualize all the different features, all the different things that they want. So for example, let's say they're building a kitchen. They say, well, here's the sink that we want, here's the countertops that we want, here's the tile floors that we want, the refrigerator, the dishwasher, all the appliances. And so they do that within the Lowe's store and they say, here's the features we want. Then they put on a virtual reality headset and they combine all of those things that they picked out for their kitchen, as an example. So now they can see, gosh, these colors look really well together. Oh, wait a second, this thing doesn't fit well. Ooh, I don't like the dimensions compared to the room that I'm in. So virtual reality allows them to actually live the features and the different things that they picked out for their kitchen and actually experience that before they buy it, before they install it within their own kitchen. So it's a really cool way for Lowe's to really give the customer a good experience and at the same time make sure that they're happy with their purchases before they go down the road of actually buying them. It's been really successful and definitely something we see continuing, not just in Lowe's, but really in any store at all. Now, Audi has done a very similar thing. It started in their London branch, and what they did is they allowed customers to use virtual reality to do a very similar thing to what Lowe's did, except to plan out the features of their car. So what's the seating going to look like? What are the features on their dashboard? What sort of colors are they going to have? What sort of outside features are they going to have? And then they'd put the virtual reality headset on and they could see it real time. They could experience what does the car look like? What is it like to sit in there? And all kinds of different things like that. Now, they did some preliminary numbers, and not necessarily everything is attributable to VR, but it actually worked quite well in terms of boosting sales because, gosh, when you get to see the features, it really adds that extra dimension of comfort and really gives the customers kind of what they're looking for in terms of that experience of driving and ultimately doing an Audi. Now, Audi did something a little bit deeper. They actually, in a lot of their storerooms right now, have a feature where you can sit down, you have an actual steering wheel in front of you, you put your VR headset on, and it simulates like you're driving. So you're actually pulling the steering wheel, you're turning it, and it simulates what it's like to drive an Audi. All the different senses of that, what it looks like, what it feels like, the different noises that it makes. It's a really interesting experience. And again, it's a really good marketing tool to say, here's what the experience would be like if you bought and owned this model of a car. Now, the last example is Marriott. So they used VR headsets in a bit more of an experimental capacity, but they brought it to various locations to allow customers to preview some of their other properties and other locations that they have hotels in around the world. So let's say you were staying in London as an example. You could put your headset on and you say, you know what, I've always wanted to go to Rome. I always wanted to go to Tokyo. I've always wanted to go to Istanbul. Well, you put that headset on, you hit the button, and all of a sudden you're on their property in any of those cities. So it just gave Marriott the opportunity to really cross-promote other properties that they have around the world by doing it physically on existing locations. So really, really cool examples, but all cool marketing experiences both for the chains or the businesses that enabled it, as well as the customers who experienced it. Now, unfortunately, there's been very little additional marketing within the apps themselves. In its early stages, marketers have been a bit cautious about entering the market because right now they're just not sure, who's using it. They don't have the data to really support it. They don't have data around their ROI once they implement a strategy. They don't know how they're going to distribute ads. It's such early stages right now that marketers have been a little leery to get involved with it. Now, they've done a little bit on YouTube. They've done a little bit of dabbling around with, specific experiences. But for the most part, they've stayed on the sidelines. So right now, early stages, it's not surprising. They weren't very active when the PC came about in the 90s or when the mobile phones were first introduced and it was just a flip phone. They weren't very present there either. But we know what eventually happened with PCs, the internet, mobile phones. Advertisers, marketers really use that as a great medium for themselves. And we expect VR to get there eventually as well. So what are our predictions more specifically? So just like online and mobile, marketers will be all over VR in no time. So they'll be creating advertisements within the apps and experiences themselves. They'll be sponsoring content of their own. They'll actually build their own content exclusively to advertise or to allow people to demo their product. They'll build content for virtual shopping and product information. Once search marketing becomes a prominent feature of virtual reality, we know there'll be search engine marketing. We know that social media is going to be a big thing within VR. Facebook already put out their first app, and while it's still in early stages, we think that that's going to be a really big thing. So social media marketing will be a big thing. And then, of course, like marketers do today with online marketing, they're going to utilize all the data that VR produces, both their own data as well as purchasing other external data to really improve customer targeting. So all those things will exist at some point. So VR is definitely something that marketers should be paying very close attention to. Finally, there's going to be a lot of attention in early marketing. The innovation is going to get a lot of press both within the VR world as well as outside of it. Now, the burdensome ads, the ones that people really don't want to see, they're probably going to get a lot of negative press for spoiling the medium's experience. But the ones that are innovative, the ones that people like, the ones that are creative, we expect them to get a lot of attention and a lot of press simply because there's not much out there. So if someone can do this in a really good way, a really good user experience type of ad, then gosh, the sky is the limit for marketers. And someone's going to do it eventually before it becomes really prominent and really almost kind of a commodity within the space, like it is for online right now. So that's the marketing world. Definitely high potential, but nothing going on right now. So it's something for all marketers to think about, and something that we certainly have our eye on as well. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground so far. We have a few more topics that we want to discuss, but we'll do that in the next video.